I realized that from the inside, that if I was going to get well and I was going to start moving forward, I needed to be honest, completely and totally honest with myself, that it wasn't my wife's fault or the kids' fault or the job or life on life. It was Brent's problem. It wasn't where I came from. I just got so tired of blaming everybody and everything.
Hey, friends, I'm Jonathan, and this is Brent, and we're excited to be together again for step number two. Last time we did step number one, and I'm looking at the AA, they call them traditions. It said step number one is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. We went through a really awesome story of Brent and his experience. And today we want to tackle the second step, which is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And so, and by the way, this podcast, we came to a name. We think we got it. We want to call this Push Each Other to the Top, because I think that's such a cool phrase. And anyway, I'm
Yeah,
excited to
I
get
agree.
into it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what do you think, Brent?
Well, you read that step, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So you're implying that I'm insane, or I was.
Yeah.
I'm a little offended
Yeah.
by that statement, but
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
sure
hey,
I'll
if
get
it
over it.
fits, maybe that's okay. No, that's good. Yeah, I think that's probably part of it, right? It's probably very intentional, these words that are chosen in these steps, I would think. And so yeah,
Oh, I
I think
definitely think they were inspired. That's for sure. Uh, yeah, we left off last time we left off, and it was just kind of like what happened to me before uh, I actually got into treatment. Some of my stories and experiences that led me to the point where I was able to surrender and give up. And that was that took a lot of years, a lot of pain. Um, I've talked a lot about being spiritually bankrupt, and I think that's a really, really, really big part of this thing. I just didn't. I just had this huge aversion from any kind of God talk at all. I mean, I just didn't want to go down that path. I wanted to find recovery, but I didn't want it to be a spiritual solution. Anything
mm.
but that.
The road went around the
Unfortunately.
church or
Yeah.
around God somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
don't let that be the answer. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, by this time, I no longer had a choice, and so when I say I surrendered, I had to give up fighting. Not so
Mm.
much as just throwing up the white flag, but just fighting the fact that I was at a place where, and I hear people say this all the time. People say this all the time. It drives me absolutely crazy. Is God will never give me more than I can handle. Well, I was at a place where I couldn't handle anymore. And that's where
Mhm.
I got
Mhm.
to before I was able to just let go. So, anyway, so that's where we were at. We got, I checked into treatment, um, Lakeview Hospital in Bountiful, Utah, the Step One program. Uh, I went in there and I got through detox, which took about 6 days. It's usually about 3 days, but some are sicker than others. And I had to go
Mhm.
through a whole lot of medical stuff before I was able to join the groups and be a part of.
Mhm.
One of the things that I noticed right off the bat, and this is super, super important to me, is the people that were in the program when I got there, they were just like me. And I had no idea people like that even existed. I didn't think there was
Mhm.
people out there that drank like I did. I didn't think there was people out there that had destroyed their lives and were in the same place that I was at. I didn't understand. And to see them as sick as I was, just gave me a lot of comfort to know that I wasn't alone, that this journey isn't about just me, it's about us, you know?
Mhm.
And that's what I
Mhm.
really like about the name of this podcast. We push each other to the top. And it takes a community to do that. And for me, tapping into that community right off the bat, I remember, back in 1988, we had a smoking room in the hospital. I still smoked. And so it was a little tiny room. You'd walk in there, and the smoke was so thick you could barely see each other. It was horrible. It smelled really, really bad. And we would go back into that room and we would share stories. And I was just like baffled that these people were saying the things they were saying to me, that they did those crazy, crazy things that I did. They had the same thoughts as I did. And I'll tell you what, it didn't take long at all for me to just have a really, really strong connection. I mean, it was one of those, oh my gosh moments, like this is unbelievable. And so anyway, I got this connection with these people right off the bat. And walking in there, you start to realize, and that step, it talks about insanity, right? Step two, uh, restore you to sanity. And I was just joking about that. You mean I'm insane? Well, I really didn't think I was. I didn't think
Mhm.
there was anything wrong with me other than I just drank too much. And the more I hung out with these people and the more I started to understand alcoholism, because I'd never really sat down. I knew that once I took a drink, I couldn't quit. I mean,
Mhm.
as soon as I got any alcohol in my body at all, it was just on. Either I passed out or I ran out, or, that's the only way I'd quit. And I would go on for days and days and days and days without stopping. So, you know, when you're out there and you're going through this process, you start to realize that maybe you got a problem. At least I started to realize that maybe I had a problem. So I would try to change my behavior. I tried
Mhm.
not to drink so much. I remember when I was working, it was Friday night. We got paid every Friday when I worked construction with my dad. And every Friday night I had a pocket full of money. I'm driving all the way from downtown Salt Lake City to Bountiful, which is about 15 minutes, okay? All that way. And I would call my wife at the time and I would say, honey, I'm going to stop by the bar. I'm going to have one beer and I'll be right home. I deserved it. I worked my butt off all week and it's Friday night and I got money in my pocket. And so I would call her up and truly believe that I'm only going to drink
Stop.
one. And
Mhm.
oh my gosh, as soon as I put one in my body, I was off to the races and I'd close the bar. And guess what? All that money was gone.
Mhm.
And I did that over and over and over again. And that's the insanity, is to
Mhm.
do the same thing over and over. And I trust me when I tell you this, when I made that phone call to her, I I wasn't lying to her. My intentions were to have one beer. See, I believed that lie. I was going to have one beer and I was going to go home. And I did that over and over and over again. And that's the insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting that it was going to be different this time. And it was
Mhm.
never different.
Mhm.
And,
And
and
how
I,
many years of that do you think you were realizing that that wasn't working? Like that was just not, was it, was it even a conscious thought as you went
it
into that or?
wasn't really, and I'm sure a lot of listeners will agree with me, it isn't something you think about often. Uh, usually when you had a bad spree or something went wrong or you got in a fight with the wife or something, you would start to question. Because I was an expert at blaming everybody else, blaming everybody and everything for my issues. It wasn't my
Mhm.
problem. Just leave me
Mhm.
alone. I'm going to have a few drinks. Leave me alone. I'm not hurting anybody but me, you know?
Mhm.
And then as time goes on, you kind of run out of these excuses, and you run out of places to point your finger, and you run out of places to blame. So for me, it was like having a realization that I might be the problem. And ooh, boy, that was scary, that
Mhm.
I might be the problem.
Mhm.
And I had a hard time swallowing that pill. So it came in little pieces. It didn't come, you know, something that I thought about often because it was a painful thought. It wasn't an easy thing to
Mhm.
think about, you
Mhm.
know. Starting to take responsibility for my alcoholism was a process. And even when I get into treatment, now I'm in treatment, right? And I'm talking to everybody else, and I'm realizing that, wow, this is Brent's problem. This is nobody else's.
Mhm.
By the time I got there, and I'd walked through everything that I'd walked through to get to the hospital, and walk in and start treatment, I started realizing that it was Brent's disease. It was Brent's responsibility. I think I had a moment in time where this thought came across to me that I need to take responsibility for my alcoholism. It's
Mhm.
nobody else's responsibility. I always
Was
wanted
that
somebody
outside? Was that coming from the outside, or did you realize that from the inside out? Like, was that?
from the inside. I
Yeah.
realized that from the inside that if I was going to get well and I was going to start moving forward, I needed to be honest, completely and totally honest with myself, that it wasn't my wife's fault or the kid's fault or the job or life on life. It was Brent's problem. It wasn't where I came from. I just got so tired of blaming everybody and everything. The only reason I got DUIs is because the North Salt Lake City Police Department hated me. It wasn't that I drank and drove. It was those
Mhm.
people were out to
Mhm.
get me, and that's the kind of insanity that uh,
Mhm.
that I felt. That I
Mhm.
just blamed everybody, and when you just realize that, okay, that gig is up. You got to take responsibility for your alcoholism. And Jonathan, I really believe that's a key of walking into a situation where you open the door for things to start happening when you take responsibility for your own actions. Because
Mhm.
until you do that, I just didn't think I had any hope. And when I started to just open that door up, that crack, that little crack that let those things in, and started thinking about, okay, it isn't the police department. It's not my ex-wife. It's not, the kid. It's not what I do for a living. What it is, I have a disease. And what I was trying to do was run from me. I didn't like me,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? And
And when you
so,
saw those others in that treatment, that step one, hearing that echo back to you, it seems like that was a pivotal moment of realizing I'm not the only one. They have problems too. And it all sounds very, very familiar. Is that?
yeah, it was a connection that, the thing is it was you just take a bunch of people that just barely got off drugs and alcohol, you put them in a room together, and we start talking about what we feel like, what's going on inside of us, what our brains are telling us. And one of the things that was very unique right off the bat that's been there ever since I got sober is I came to find out that my thoughts were not unique. Their thoughts were the same as my thoughts. The way I felt, the way I process things. Uh, for instance, with my anger, I always, every time I felt uncomfortable or embarrassed, or I felt like somebody was better than me or whatever, I just got angry. It would turn to anger, and then, here we are in treatment, and somebody brings up the fact that, anger is a secondary emotion, that there's always something underneath that. What is that something? you know? And so I was able to start looking at things. It started a whole new path for me of not only just taking responsibility for what I was feeling and what I was thinking, but start to take responsibility for my whole life,
Hmm.
for everything. Yeah, now that's boy, that's scary when you start
That's a
thinking, I
that's a
gotta I
lot to
gotta
take
take
in. All
yeah, it's but and this was a really slow process. It didn't happen overnight. I mean,
Mhm.
it's funny that I just said that because the truth is I got well is so fast. I mean, in the beginning, things were moving so fast and all these thoughts and all this stuff's happening for me. But when you're living in it, it feels like forever.
Mhm.
Years back, years pass and you look back at it and you think to yourself, wow, I couldn't have gotten that any quicker. But when I'm going through it, it feels like people would say, "Oh, Brent, you look better. You sound better." It's like, what? I didn't feel anything, but other people could see something in me, and I didn't feel anything. I was like, okay, I can see Joe over there in the corner, and he looks great. He's only been here for 2 weeks, and man, he's eating. His color's back. He's smiling. I didn't feel any of that. I felt like I'd been drug over the coals, and I had.
Mhm.
There was so much. They were talking about God. Oh man, go into a group and they brought God up, and it was like, ah, I got to do this, you know. But Jonathan, I
Yeah,
was willing to do it because I wanted so bad to get well. I just
yeah,
did not want to be that miserable ever again.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so
So, what was
that's what.
that point that you came to believe in that greater power? Was there a moment or a meeting, or what helped you get there, or does it take a number of months after that? Like, is it?
Well, that's the beauty because this is a funny part of the story. I didn't grow up in a religious home. We never went to church on Easter, and my mother would dress us up in these funny little clothes when I was a little kid and take us to church on Easter, and that was about the only time we went to church. I remember when uh, John F. Kennedy died, we went to church. Now that was one of the one time that we went to church. I don't remember
Mm,
going to church a lot. So for me, this spiritual part of the program came to me in little bits and pieces, and I love it today because this is my experience. This is my spiritual path. It's
mhm,
not influenced by anything outside of me. I lived it,
mhm,
I felt it, I did it. And for me, when when uh, when I got to treatment, one of my counselors told me, they said, Brent, if you want to get well, right? You want to stay sober. And I says, yeah, I desperately want to stay sober. I want my life back. And they said, well, what you need to do is go back to your room and I want you to get on your knees and pray. And I looked at him like, I mean, it was like, come on, you're being totally ridiculous. I mean, that just felt like they were asking me to do so much. It surprises me today how resistant I was just to take
mhm,
that little tiny, suggestion.
mhm.
But I thought to myself, well, Grant, you better listen to these people. They seem to know what they're talking about. They're the professionals. So I went back to my room and I closed the door. I didn't want anybody to see me on my knees. Oh my Lord, that would have been so embarrassing. And, and I got on my knees. And I'll tell you, Jonathan, when I got on my knees, I had no idea what to say. There was no words. I just didn't know how to connect with that higher power. Did I need to do a little preamble or something? I mean, what did I need to do to get this so-called God to listen to me? And when I got on my knees, the only word that came out of my mouth was help. That's all I said. That was my first prayer. And I just sat there. I just sat on my knees, just was on my knees, and I couldn't utter any other words. But I'll tell you, it came from my soul when I asked for help. It wasn't just a hollow help. It was a deep meaning help. Now, when I said that, I didn't feel anything. I didn't see no burning bushes. I didn't feel anything miraculous. I didn't hear any music or anything like that. There was nothing. And I went on with my life, in treatment. And then I'll never forget. I went to a meeting when I was just about done with treatment. And in the meetings, they give out chips of sobriety. And the first chip you get is a 30-day chip. And it was a white plastic chip. And it said on it 1 day at a time. And then on the other side, it said 30 days. And I went to a meeting and they handed me that little white chip. And when I took that chip in my hand, I realized from the time I asked for help to that 30 days, I hadn't been thirsty one time. Now, something happened and it hit me like a ton of bricks. That prayer worked. That prayer, I said, when I felt nothing, when I hear no music, I didn't, something happened. And so that was my first real, I don't know what word to use. The first time that I realized that something was changing and I was getting some faith that, just maybe. I mean, if I could put 30 days together, that's 4 weekends. Maybe I could continue on this path 1 day at a time. So,
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
that's so cool. Like the effort and the heartfelt prayer, just that one word, and to see the realization of that as you accepted that chip, that's yeah, I don't know. To me, in my book, that's a miracle.
yeah,
To
yeah, yeah.
not
It was nothing.
not
I mean, I look
I
back
don't know.
now and I can't explain that.
Yeah.
I, you know, now from the time I said help to when I got to that meeting, there was a lot of stuff that went on at that treatment center that was was difficult. They called me out. I think I shared a story with you about my reading. I couldn't read, and my roommate, we read a daily reflections every morning, and I'm about as stubborn as you can get. They'd ask me to read, and no, I'm not reading. What are you crazy? It's like, no, I'm not reading. And my roommate, we bunked two to a room, and he took me back, and he says, "Hey, Brent," he said, "will you do me a favor?" I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Will you read tomorrow?" I said, "No, Scott, I'm not going to read tomorrow. That's insane. I'm not. No, I'm not going to embarrass myself. I can't read. I've told you that I just don't do that." And he says, "Well, I'll tell you what. I'll read with you, and we can practice. So tomorrow when you get up, you'll be ready. You'll know this. You've already studied it. You'll know it." And I'm here to tell you that Scott sat down and here we go again. Somebody pushing me to the top. Scott taking the time to work with me and to not judge me. He didn't judge that I had a problem reading. He didn't laugh at me when I stumbled on a word. He worked with me. And it was just
Mhm.
one alcoholic helping another. And that's how this thing works. And I got up the next morning and I read that, and here we go again. I accomplished it. I walked through a fear, and the end result is faith,
Mhm.
just like that prayer. Little
Mhm.
things started happening to me that I started to build some faith in the process because for a long, 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 long time when I was drinking and drugging, I never, ever succeeded at anything. I always failed. And when I got into the program and started taking other people's direction, they were pushing me to the top. I started to succeed. And I've continued. I have not failed at anything since I
Mhm.
walked in the doors of that treatment center. So was I
It wasn't
restored
just,
to sanity?
yeah, for
I
sure.
was restored to sanity.
Yeah. I mean, it's not only faith in the treatment, faith in a higher power, but faith in yourself, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
seemed to be
Oh,
growing. And it wasn't that you were doing it alone. I think maybe there can be that fear of, like you said, it's only me. I'm the only one that has these thoughts. But now it seems as though you have this brotherhood around you to help push you up, and that's beautiful. That's just really
oh
cool.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was, yeah, I can't even describe what it feels like to, because these people are going through the same things. Their issues were a little different, you know.
Hmm.
They had a little different problems. Instead of reading or something like that, they had an eating disorder. Or they had, there was men and women there together, and some of them struggled with all kinds of different things, and we all we helped each other to. First off, there was no judgment. That's a big deal.
Hmm.
Like where I grew up, uh, I felt like I was judged all the time. I felt continuously judged, and I never, I and I just kind of threw in the towel. Well, if that's who you think I am, well, I'll show you. I'll be 10 times worse. Just that
Hmm.
stubborn, bullheaded,
Hmm.
defiant person that I was my whole life. And now I get into a place like this, and so you wipe away the judgment, and we're sharing with each other real, intimate, hard stuff. I mean, we're facing, some of the damage, some of the wreckage of our past that we hadn't shared with anybody before, and now you're facing these things. And I'll tell you what, there's a tremendous amount of guilt and shame that goes along with this. Um, the guilt and the shame was overwhelming. Somewhere along the way, I realized that there's a process to relapse, right? You go, you you start, you're alone, and you start thinking about all the horrible, terrible things you did. So you go in this circle, and you get up to this point where you've done all these terrible, rotten things, and you fill yourself up full of guilt and shame. And it's so thick and heavy. And there's one thing out there that's going to take care of that guilt and shame, and that's drinking. And it gives you a reprieve for a very short period of time. And the longer you drink and the more times you go through this process, the shorter the period of time is that you don't feel that guilt and shame.
Hmm.
So I realized along the way that if I felt the guilt and shame and I didn't take it to the next level of drinking, then the guilt and shame, I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but it was done. It's done. There isn't going to be any more. Once you walk through this path, and once you get past that guilt and shame, and you start living a life that is commendable, and you feel good about you, then you don't have to waller in that guilt and shame. It's like this huge blanket, this hot blanket that you would cover yourself in, and you didn't want to peek out and look at nobody.
Hmm.
You didn't.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
if you quit doing stupid stuff, it starts to go away.
Wow. Is that
And
a
just for
self-forgiveness? Is that how you,
it's a process
or
of forgiving yourself.
is that
Yeah.
where it is? Yeah.
And that's the magic of the steps, because
Yeah.
now we walked through step one. My life was totally unmanageable, you know, and it's funny because it's the only step that talks about alcohol. I'm powerless over alcohol. And I realized that every time I made that phone call, honey, I'm going to have one beer and that's it. But once that booze entered my body, I no longer had a choice. I no longer
Mhm.
had any choice. I was going to drink no matter what.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so you walk through that step one and you get to that place where, you know, you walk into step two, and step two was not, step two is an ongoing process, I believe. I believe that one, two, and three are ongoing. I don't think that you ever do them and you put them behind you and they're gone. I
Mhm.
have to realize the insanity of doing the same thing over and over again. I've got a brain that continually tells me that I'm no good. I'm not good enough. I don't belong here. I never felt like I fit in anywhere. And I talked to many, many, many alcoholics, and they feel the same thing.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is just lies.
Mhm.
My brain, for whatever reason, I am Jonathan. I can be so mean to myself. I can
Mhm.
I can just abuse myself in between my ears. I would never let anybody else talk to me like that. But the things that I say to myself, I had to learn along the way that my brain is it's not telling the truth. That voice
Mhm.
inside of me is not, it's judgmental and it's not good. I've got to learn to put that down and to start breaking it up in just and one of the things that you learn is you just living in the moment, right here, right now, you know. And they I remember going to the meeting, when I first went to treatment, they'd stick me in this little van and we called it the druggie buggy, and they would take us to meetings, and we'd go there, and I'd hear things like keep coming back. They would look me in the eye and say keep coming back. Nobody invited me back to anywhere. It's like
You
even my
want me
drug
to come
dealer,
back?
even my drug dealer didn't want me to come back. Here, go away.
Wow.
They didn't want me, and they were saying, "Here, let me give you a cup of coffee, and we
Mhm.
want you to come back. Keep coming back." Wow.
Wow. That's amazing. Like these are new experiences for you, right? Like
Yes.
this breaking through, understanding there's a different way, seeing the others repeat and mirror to you the things that you had said to yourself or the situations that you recognize. And now you're being invited to be a
Yeah.
part of this and to come back and to keep being there. So how after all these years, was it 36, 37 years?
Coming up on
What
37 in October.
There you go, 37 in October. What is it now? I mean, looking back, obviously, where that's what we're doing, but how do you keep off that track of just going downhill? I mean, I mean, I'll be vulnerable here too. I, I, I am my worst enemy. What you just said about um, saying things to yourself that you would not allow anyone to say. I've faced that, and it's been rough for me, not to the degree that you have, but um, how do you avoid that? How do you get past that? What's the tricks? What do you do?
Well, it it's all the tools that you learn along the way. When I start this process, and we've just talked about one and two, you talk about those two steps. There's some valuable lessons that you learn along the way. And I like to, and a lot of people do this in the program, is they talk about a toolbox, and you get these tools and you start gathering them in this toolbox.
Mm,
And you know, like when I got on my knees and asked for help, that applies to everything. That doesn't just apply to my alcoholism. That applies to that voice in my head.
mm, mm,
When, and that's just one tool. Living one day at a, I just said it, living in the moment right here, right now. You know, I just had dinner. I got a roof over my head. I I'm talking to my son on a, I'm in a really, really good place right here. And if I can focus on right here, right now, watch it. Watch a dog, for instance. Dogs will teach you more about that than anything else in the world. A dog lives in that moment in time. It doesn't worry about the past. It doesn't worry about the future. It is just, he's wagging his tail and he's looking, all he wants is a little love right now. And they're totally happy, you know? And I'm the same way. I just got to pull myself back in and realize that my brain wants to hurt me for whatever reason. And I know I'm not alone. You saying that makes me feel closer to you. You being vulnerable and saying those words, I understand right off the bat. My brain works just like your brain works. And we're all in this together. And if there's anything I can give people out there in podcast land, is we are so valuable as a human being, and to be able to face these things. Life is not easy, and there's so many challenges along the way. But to pick up these tools that I'm talking about and they talk about this program being a program of action. This is a program of action. So you've got tools, right? Well, the first, I'm feeling crappy and I start telling myself bad things. I don't just stop right there, the first thought, and jump on my knees and say, help. I have to be miserable before I get to the point where I can start asking for help. And the longer that I live and the more I understand that I want to avoid getting to that place, the more willing I am to get on my knees earlier or to find another tool that works one day at a time. A lot of people in the program said, if you're having a bad day, get out of yourself and go help somebody. Go mow somebody's lawn, but don't let them know you're doing it. That doesn't count. You got to go mow their lawn or go wash their car or go do some good deed for somebody without them even knowing it. Because if they catch you, it ain't for them. It's for you. You need to learn to get out of you and do something good for somebody else. Now, that is not my thought pattern when I get feeling horrible or depressed. What can I do for somebody else? I just waller in, self-pity. I can't even get off the couch. And I might stay there for 3 or 4 days, and it might get really, I've always had a seasonal depression. And in January, that's why I kind of moved out of Utah. January for me was a very, very hard month. Like the end of January for 2 weeks, I'd get in this deep, dark depression where, I couldn't get up and go get a loaf of bread from the grocery store. It just seemed like, what an order. It's just overwhelming. I can't get myself in the car to go do it. So, there's and a lot of alcoholics and addicts and people that are recovering for whatever deal a lot with depression. And depression is so serious, and it takes a lot of courage and strength to walk through just getting out of yourself and picking up those tools and putting them into practice. But I'm here to tell you they work. I mean, yeah, I think it's good to make a game plan. Like I knew it was coming in January, so I could okay, when I start feeling like this, and this, these are the things I'm going to do. And one of the big ones is reaching out and telling on myself, call Jonathan and say, Jonathan, dude, I know you're my son and I don't want you to, judge me, but the truth of the matter is I'm not doing well. Does that make me a weak person? I don't think so. It sounds like it when you're in it.
Yeah, I know. No, I think it takes so much courage to reach for help like you did on your knees. And then, like you said, this is an ongoing, a program of action, and to show up and to have a plan and to do those things that you've learned over these years. Yeah, that's all courage. That's amazing. It really is.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm not sure I know where the courage comes from sometimes. uh, but it doesn't
Yeah.
matter, right? It doesn't matter where it comes from. You just, you know, there was a saying I learned right off the bat, if it's not odd, it's God.
There
And
you go.
it's not odd. You get through this, you get through a difficult time and you face something and you look back on it. That's what I love doing now. I can look back on this stuff when I was in a really, really, really bad way. You got to consider something. When I went into treatment, I had a ninth grade education. I couldn't read, I couldn't write. Uh, I was a 34-year-old man. They say that you quit maturing when you started using. Well, I started using when I was 12. So I was like a 34-year-old man with the mind of a 12-year-old, trying to, support a wife and kids and, you know, just going to work and trying to make a mortgage payment and house payment and all of those things that life, let alone being a father and doing all those things. I'll tell you what, I was totally overwhelmed. And what happens to Brent when he gets overwhelmed? Well, he gets angry, you know? And so for the first, for a long, 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 long time, Brent was just angry for a long time because I was constantly battling, fear, facing life on life's terms. It was a, it was scary, you know. And then as I get out of treatment, they tell you to get a sponsor. And oh man, you talk about fear. Now I'm gonna walk up to another man, okay, and I'm gonna ask that man to sponsor me. I would have rather fought a football team than to ask for help. And
Yeah.
I'm not kidding you.
Yeah.
So, I had to
Asking for help again,
ask
except
for
for
help.
someone you can see right in front of you.
Yeah, yeah. Somebody that's going through the same thing I'm going through that has a little more experience, a little more time. They knew the
Hmm.
book, they knew this, they knew the steps, they knew, they'd been in recovery for quite a while, and they could show me how they walked through the process. But for whatever reason, man, that was so intimidating. It was just difficult to ask for help. But once again, if you want to stay sober, and it's a program of action, well, they're not going to
Hmm.
beat my door down saying, "Hey, I want to sponsor you." I've got to. So you go to meetings and you listen to people and you find somebody that has what you want,
Oh, okay.
and uh, and then you go ask them if they'll help you.
Wow.
And
How many weeks or months was this when you asked for your sponsor? How will that?
oh, it was right off the bat. I mean, when I
Oh,
left treatment, they trust me, they knew me.
they're
They
like,
said,
bro, you
"Brent, you
better,
can."
yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
better get
They
one.
there was a men's meeting up in Sugar House that was a really, really, really tough meeting. And they wouldn't even let you speak at this meeting until you had like 1 year. You couldn't even open your mouth. These guys were
Wow.
mean. They were rough. And
Wow.
my counselor said, "That's the meeting you need to go to." I never did. I think I went to that meeting maybe one time, but yeah, the meetings I went to in Bountiful were there was only like 3 meetings a week, and so I'd go to those meetings, and I found a guy that I had a lot of respect for. I listened to his story, and I asked him right off the bat. It
Mm.
was, oh man, I was shaking in my boots when I asked him. Oh, if he had said no, I think I would have just turned into a puddle or something. I don't know what would have happened to me. My arms and legs would have fell off or something. I don't know. I knew it was going to be terrible, but
So for someone who doesn't know, like, do you have to be sober for so long to be a sponsor? Like, is there a rule with that or is there not? Or How's that work?
Well, just, there's no rules in AA really. I mean, you talk to everybody and they'll tell you the same thing. They had to work the steps themselves. They can't walk you through the steps if they haven't done it.
Right.
So, and they have to have a certain amount of sobriety. When I was new, it was a kind of an unwritten rule that they had to have 1 year or more to sponsor you. Um, but trust me, when you got 30 days and somebody says they've got a year, it's like, oh my gosh, they're like a saint. I mean, that's unbelievable. 365 days without drinking? Come on. Christmas, New Year's. I mean, all
All
those
the
holidays
holidays.
under their
Yeah.
belt. They didn't drink.
Wow.
So, yeah. I remember when I first got out of treatment, there was a young gal that I met. It was her and her sister, and her sister was brand new, and she had like 90 days, and this girl was only, here I am, 34 years old. This girl was like 19 or something, and she had like 60 or 90 days, something like that. Oh my gosh. I followed her around like a little puppy dog. I mean, we we all hung out together and we went to meetings together, and it was just like we couldn't wait to get to the next meeting. And some Friday nights we'd go to 3 meetings. Uh, it was just it was so funny to think about. She had 90 days and how much admiration I had for her. I mean, I just put her on a pedestal. It was just like, wow, how does 20 years old and this girl, 19, 20, how the heck could she ever stay sober that long?
Mhm.
So, pushing each other to the top comes in all kinds of forms, man.
Comes
You
different ways
just,
that you may not expect. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, different things. But
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I
When,
don't,
when did
I
oh, go
really
ahead.
want to, I really want to, for the next session, really sit down and talk about, that sponsor and that sponsorship and where that took me. And I think there's some real funny things that are in this next episode that I think are going to be very entertaining.
That sounds like a teaser right there.
Yeah, yeah,
For
some good.
episode 3.
Episode 3 is going to be a
Yeah.
humdinger, let me tell you.
Dinger.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where I start on that
I love
path.
that. Yeah,
So,
that's really cool. That's awesome. Well, I think we could probably wrap up here. I think we spent a lot of good time on number 2, and here's some really cool stories about unity and finding yourself, finding forgiveness, finding help, finding a higher power that's greater than yourself to try to bring some sanity back to your life. Um, all really important parts of a recovery, it sounds like, and I'm excited to hear where this goes because I don't think I've heard some of these stories yet. So this will
no, you
be
haven't heard these stories.
this will be good. This will be awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to go to the next episode. So we have some good information.
Yeah,
So,
awesome. Well, thanks for watching again. This is such a fun experience to be able to have uh, Brent share your stories and to be able to push each other to the top. I think that's an amazing title for our podcast. So we'll see you next time and come back for more.
goodbye.
Thanks for listening to Push Each Other to the Top. Brent's story is a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there's still a path forward and someone willing to walk it with us. If this episode meant something to you, share it. And if you're struggling right now, please know you're not alone. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss the next story. And if you can, leave a quick review. It helps more people find these conversations. New episodes drop soon. We hope you'll come back. Continue listening for a behind-the-scenes moment after we ended the episode.
There's a song that we used to sing when we were in the druggy buggy.
Oh, yeah.
Was it Lean on Me? Lean on me when you are
When you're
down. Blah, blah, blah,
yeah.
blah. Yeah.
Yeah, I could dig that one up. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Somebody to lean on.
Yes. I love it.
Brother, when you need a hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would.
Let's do that.
We used to sing that at treat. Boy, we were just all hollering.
The druggy
Lean on
buggy.
me. And that kind of fits in with our title and everything. Push each other to the top. You know, there's so much. I like this format because working the steps really keeps everything in that order of what it was like. I mean, and the next little while is gonna really, I mean, take us to the next level. I mean, this is just you're just getting a little tiny taste of things right now, and as the next few steps go along, I mean, this really gets going, and there's some real powerful stuff to come. So I'm excited about that. I'm kind of thinking that we've got a lot of material. We do.
Yeah, I
We
think
have a
so.
lot of
I
material.
think so.
We have a
I
lot
think
of
you
material.
You got 30, almost 37 years of material waiting there. Lots of stories.